Hey everyone, welcome to the Smart Economy Podcast, a production of neonewstoday.com. I'm your host, Dylan Grabowski. In this episode of the Smart Economy Podcast, we were joined by Philippe Schommers, the head of infrastructure at Gnosis, an entity that has built a variety of decentralized infrastructure for the Ethereum ecosystem, dating back to its inception in 2015. In this episode, Philippe and I spoke about the history of the Gnosis ecosystem and its various products, how Gnosis Chain is similar to but different from the Ethereum chain, building MEV resistance into the core protocol, how governance impacts infrastructural development, various technical aspects of Gnosis Chain and the broader ecosystem, and much more. Just a reminder, nothing said on this podcast is a solicitation to buy or sell any tokens, that the host or guests may hold tokens discussed in any given episode, and that users can check out our disclaimer page on neonewstoday.com to learn more about the tokens and assets that we hold. I really enjoyed this conversation with Philippe, and I hope you enjoy it too. Hey everyone, welcome to the Smart Economy Podcast. Today, we are joined by Philippe Schommers, the head of infrastructure at Gnosis, an entity that has built a plethora of decentralized infrastructure for the Ethereum ecosystem and now EVM land. How are you doing today, Philippe?
I'm doing very well. Thank you. What about you?
I'm doing great. I had a chance to kind of dig into some of your previous talks, like at DAppCon last year, and I'm excited to kind of jump into the technical and infrastructure space of blockchain in general. So I'm really excited about this conversation today. But Gnosis has been around for quite a long time. So I think that there is a level of kind of respect that you and your team bring to the blockchain industry. So I'm really curious to just kind of hear your insights as you're the head of infrastructure at Gnosis, going on 9 years now. So before we jump into the conversation, I kind of want to talk about the broader blockchain industry and just hear what the head of infrastructure at a long-running project has to think about this kind of dual-sided question. So first, what are some of the critical elements of blockchain that have made this such a staying force, this technology that can't die? And secondly, what are some of the critical missing elements that we need to build in order to make this technology robust and everlasting?
Yeah, so very good question. I think, to explain why it's a technology that's, cannot be destroyed, basically, and is here to last. That's basically the entire idea of it, right? So having it being decentralized and, not dependent on any central entity, meaning, of course, that no company can shut it down, no government technically can shut it down either. Robustness is designed inside the protocol, right? So that was the initial goal of Bitcoin. For Ethereum, it's exactly the same. Now, I guess our chains that are less focused on that side and more on speed or security or whatever, other types of trade-offs. But for Ethereum and Gnosis, because we are based on Ethereum, of course, those are the pillars, right? So decentralized, censorship resistance. That's most of it. Of course, having a very large set of node runners in many different countries, many different jurisdictions, different skill levels, different type of people. Just having a very diverse set of node runners and validators and clients as well. So, for example, on Ethereum, we have, many different execution clients and consensus layer clients that also make it so that if one of them has an issue, the other ones, make sure the network keeps going on, basically. And that's also very, very important. I guess on Ethereum side, is actually maybe a bit better than Bitcoin, as far as I know, because I think they only have one client. But other chains such as Solana, I'm pretty sure, are also having multiple clients as well right now. So I think that's very important indeed. Yeah. And so that the decentralized aspects, of course, that makes it so that network cannot be shut down and will live on forever.
So from your perspective, what is missing? What do we need to build further to ensure that this diversity and decentralization of validator set, of node runners, of clients, this is great. It's gotten us to this point, but if mission was accomplished, then we wouldn't have Gnosis continuing to build, and we wouldn't have you and your team working on next iterations and bringing out new mainnets of the next level of your blockchain. So what is missing then? What do we need to build further? What do we need as an industry to secure the values that this decentralization has brought to this technology?
Right. So I think there are actually a few missing pieces. I would say the most important ones are scalability, of course, because on Ethereum, it's quite expensive. Let's be real for a minute. Like doing transactions is not accessible to everyone, right? For me, Ethereum will have achieved its goal when everyone in the world will be able to maybe not on the base layer, maybe not on Ethereum, but on layer 2s or layer 3s or whatever the community is going to come up with. But when everyone is able to use the technology, then we will have sufficiently scaled. We are very far from that right now. So that's a very important part. And I think, upcoming hard forks, hopefully Oracle soon, let's hope so, should, at least be a stepping stone towards that. Scaling is also multiple sides, I would say. So first, of course, the number of transactions, but we should also need to be able to kind of scale, quote unquote, in a sense that users need to be able to run nodes in an easier way or less resource intensive way, So right now, Ethereum nodes and Gnosis nodes by extension, again, we are on the very same stack. Don't use that much like CPU and RAM or even bandwidth, so that's kind of fine. But it uses a lot of disk space. And this, of course, will continue growing forever, basically. And that's a huge issue. So having nice clients, which hopefully will facilitate at some point, is very important. So that's for the scalable part, I would say. And then, of course, everything that has to do with user experience, basically. So being able to interact with the chain without having to safely store mnemonics, make sure you don't you don't lose it, because then you lose funds. You don't leak it or get it stolen or whatever, because then again, you lose funds. And understanding how to, which wallet to use, making sure you're interacting in a safe way with contracts. So they are, there are wallets now that do this, of course, a bit better, explicitly show what happens when you sign a transaction. For example, okay, if you sign this, you will transfer 10 ETH out and get nothing in return, for example, then you might know that it's a scam or whatever. But we are still very far from having very good user experience. And that's a huge blocker to get larger adoption. Those are the two main points, in my opinion.
I'm a believer. I left a previous career to work in the blockchain space. So I've been here thick and thin since basically 2017, but I do want to play devil's advocate. The longest running issue since I've been here basically has been this issue of scalability and UX. So while there still needs to be improvement, maybe you could share a little bit of insights as to how scalability and UX has improved over the years, even though we still have a long ways to go.
Of course. For Ethereum, so let's be quite, on topic right now, we are waiting for the Dencon hard fork, right? That's for Ethereum is going to happen on March 13th, and for Gnosis Chain, 2 days before that, so March 11th. This is a very important hard fork, in my opinion, because it will enter a type of transaction that will allow people basically to store data on chain, but for a defined time period, basically. So that data will expire after around 2 weeks. So it's ephemeral, and that's very important, because then node runners don't have to store this forever, which is one of the scalability issues, right? And because we have that data now, we can, have L2s on top of it. So we will have more data. maybe it's a bit more difficult to explain than that, but basically we have standard transactions that don't change and basically work like now. And we will add that hard fork adds a second part, so for Rust specifically. So it adds scalability by default because we don't lose what we had before, and we add additional data storage. And that data storage will be used primarily by layer 2 chains, which of course then also scale Ethereum kind of indirectly. Of course, it's not the base layer, but still you get basically the security from Ethereum and most advantages from it through those layer 2 chains. So this is great progress, I would say. So that's now in 2 weeks, I guess. So looking forward to that. And on the UX side, I don't have such a concrete example, but as I mentioned before, wallets have improved so that they actually emulate the transaction and not only tell you that it's going to fail or succeed, but also what actually is going to happen. For example, Rabbi Wallet does this quite well and just shows you what's going to happen. Also on the security side, if you interact with some known scams or phishing sites or contracts or whatever, this is also taken care of, I would say, mostly at this time. Of course, account abstraction is also a good point forward. The current implementation I'm not necessarily convinced by, but at least it's a stepping stone towards something that can at some point become useful, hopefully. But for example, Safe is doing a fantastic job for securing your accounts and currencies and crypto, whatever, a bit better. Internally at Gnosis, we are actually working on Gnosis Wallet, which is a wallet, a crypto wallet. It's also going to integrate Gnosis Pay. So Gnosis Pay, the upcoming, they launched now, so they launched February 5th, I think. Visa debit card, that is fully non-custodial, so that takes the tokens directly from on-chain. And Gnosis Wallet will integrate a classical wallet, I would say, crypto wallets with this crypto debit cards.
Yeah, I love that. Actually, before you were kind of trying to figure out what UX to talk about, and account abstraction is. I work in a non-EVM ecosystem, and account abstraction is something that we're talking about integrating into the core layer. So that's a specific instance in which maybe it's not up to snuff where you would like to see it, but it is something that other ecosystems would like to emulate. And it is nice to go into Etherscan and see if there was a fraudulent address that was used for phishing or scamming and other types of scamming addresses. So I appreciate the insights that you have for kind of how these areas have improved over the past years. So kind of digging a little bit into your background, I'm just curious to hear how you ended up here. You have a background in web and mobile app development. So what was your trajectory like coming into the blockchain space? How did you get interested in blockchain and then end up at Swarm and now at Gnosis?
So initially I started at Swarm because, I did my master's thesis basically on decentralized data storage for IoT devices. So this got me into everything related to decentralized storage. So Swarm, RE, Filecoin, IPFS, all those fun things. And I participated in that in the Discord basically to, get some information from the dev team, but also help others out, test the technology, basically, see where we are at the moment and if this can actually be used for something useful. And then I guess I got offered a job at Swarm for being active and basically doing what I was already doing, but as a community manager. I have a master's degree in computer science. So after doing the community management, I quickly became, because I was doing this while I was doing my master's thesis as well. But after that, I became a developer. Swarm is actually deployed on Gnosis, which is how the connection kind of happened. Yeah, and then I basically did the same thing for Gnosis. I was also very active, I think, during the merge. So yeah, a bit more than a year ago. And yeah, same thing. I joined Gnosis on that. And actually, maybe another funny story on that side. So I actually had a Facebook game in the past that had like 130 million players, which is a lot. Like it was one of the biggest games on the platform for, I think, 2 years. And yeah, so up to 4 million a day, which is quite substantial. Yeah. But sadly, like Facebook decided one day to another to just close us for no apparent reason. And that actually like increased my conviction about like blockchain, censorship resistance, and no one being able to like shut you down for no reason. So yeah, I became kind of convinced based on this specific interaction as well.
That's kind of very similar to Vitalik's origin story with his World of Warcraft item being taken away, or its striking power reduced because of the centralized powers that be. Also, we had Gregor, the executive director of Swarm Foundation, on the podcast last year. So it's nice to have a fellow alma mater from that decentralized file storage protocol. You talked about kind of the CS element, the computer science element, and how you were working on your master's, and kind of this moment where this game you worked on got removed from the Facebook marketplace seemingly for no reason, even though you had 4 million daily active users. That's a very kind of like technological oriented origin story. But what about like the first time you heard about the digital asset itself, like Bitcoin or Ethereum? What were kind of your initial thoughts? You strike me as a very builder first focused type of individual. So did the digital asset itself just kind of like not do it for you? Did you look past it? Were you just like, oh, this is cool, and then thought about something else? What was kind of like the first time you heard about crypto, basically?
That's a good question. I'm not sure I actually remember. I know it must have started between 2014 and 15, I would guess. So back in the days when you still could get actual Bitcoin from faucets. Maybe it was even a bit before. I actually don't remember. I know I played a bit with it, and then didn't do anything useful with it, so forgot about it for a few years. And then I think in 2017 I started mining a bit again because I thought it was very interesting as a concept. I did it on Ethereum. And then at that point I started looking a bit more into many chains and technology, and actually understanding what is going on and how it works and what a blockchain actually is. Because of course you start by seeing Bitcoin, okay, money go up, whatever. Back in the day it was less the case, but many people I would guess at least are in the ecosystem for making money, basically. But yeah, that I can't. That's not sufficient. Something that just goes up that makes no sense, and then just making money. Well, what's the point, right? I am very technologically, focused, I would say. So yeah, I want to understand how it works, why it works, what can be improved. But at that time, I wasn't in crypto full time by any means. It was just mostly for fun, I guess.
Yeah, the first time I came across Bitcoin I was a broke grad student in 2013, and it had dropped to like $300. And I remember seeing memes on Reddit, and it just kind of like went over my head. And then I didn't come back for 4 more years until the ICO boom, and kind of got bit by the bug of what these decentralized projects promised. So it's really kind of interesting that you bring this philosophy to your role at Gnosis. And at the beginning of the conversation, we mentioned kind of like the OG status that Gnosis has. It's among the longest running blockchain projects. It's gone through several iterations since 2015. It was one of the first consensus supported projects that the consensus entity kind of gave support to. So maybe you could just give the listener who is maybe a newer market entrant from the class of 2021, or maybe is just stumbling into the blockchain and crypto space for the first time today, can you just kind of give us the elevator pitch or the quick, brief overview of what Gnosis is and kind of run through the history and maybe some of the major iterations that the ecosystem has done since 2015?
Okay, so I joined Gnosis fairly recently. So since 2015, I'm not quite sure. But Gnosis is very active in the blockchain industry. Of course, they started with prediction markets, and then of course Gnosis Safe. Gnosis Safe happened, I guess, which is now called Safe Wallet. So they spun out. And then of course Gnosis Protocol, which became CowSwap, which is on mainnet and Gnosis Chain. That is like kind of similar to, not the same, but I guess people know Uniswap a bit more still. CowSwap, of course, is way better, but anyways. Of course, a lot of VC aspects as well. So Gnosis invests heavily in many different projects. A very interesting ecosystem with a bit of everything, I guess. So the wallets, the DeFi aspects, Carpetsky as well, that just spun out as well, or is spinning out, I'm not quite sure. That is doing treasury management. I think they do it for ENS and the Gnosis Treasury. That's already 3 bigger projects. Gnosis Chain now, since I guess, I'm not quite sure anymore, but 2.5 years. That was previously XDAI. So we have the chain, we have the DeFi platform, treasury management, account abstractions, / the safe wallets. What else? I'm sure there's many other projects, many of which we are actually working on right now. Of course, Gnosis Pay being a huge one. So Gnosis, I guess, is more focused on payments right now. So for the next 2 years, probably, everything related to user experience, making it possible for users to actually use normal non-technical users to have access to crypto with, for example, that Visa debit card. So that's Gnosis Wallet, which will also be way more accessible to users than maybe a MetaMask or something like that on mobile. A bit of everything, I would say, at Gnosis.
Yeah, no, I feel like in order to survive this long in an industry where people's perceptions of a project can change overnight, we really do have to kind of continue iterating and building upon the composable building blocks that came before. And I think that that's what's so commendable about Gnosis. You just listed off a series of projects and protocols and products and focus areas. And having been in an ecosystem that's been around since 2015 myself, if you don't continue to iterate and improve, then you just kind of like slowly fade away. And I think something that I'm taking away from a lot of the talking points that you're bringing up is Gnosis Pay. And I kind of had my mind blown last year when the stable coin talk started becoming more apparent alongside this real world asset kind of narrative. And long story short, the killer crypto use case today is Tether, USDT, and it's on Tron. Everybody's using Tether on Tron. And so this is just a kind of a calling from the market stating that they do indeed want payment options, which is what cryptocurrency was supposed to be to begin with. If you read the Bitcoin white paper, it was supposed to be a digital cash, an internet native currency. So I think that that's super cool to hear that there's a focus on payments. And I really want to talk about that in a bit. But also something I'm really curious is, as the head of development for the Gnosis ecosystem, you have mentioned so many different types of projects that have so many different types of focal areas. So what is your focus then? What is kind of your role? Do you manage a bunch of teams? Are you the head of the Gnosis Chain team and the head of the Gnosis Pay team and the head of the incubated projects like CowSwap and Safe and the wallets? What does this look like? Because if you're the head of infrastructure for Gnosis, you have a ton of infrastructure to maintain.
Right. So I don't have that many responsibilities by any means. So as I mentioned, Safe spun out. So Safe Wallet is a completely different entity at this point. So they have everything in-house. Same for CowSwap. fully external team at this point, Skarpatki as well. So many, I don't remember exactly the numbers, but I think when I joined a bit more than a year ago, or a bit before that, actually, there were like more than 150 people working at Gnosis. Now, most of them are gone to those spun out projects. So the team is way more at Gnosis right now. Gnosis Space are actually also a bit separate because they're very different from what we were doing before, I guess, with, different expertise, more in the like traditional finance and banking system. So what I do is mostly everything that is to do with the chain. So Gnosis Chain, bridges, DevOps for Gnosis, and then, app development, auditing, blockchain analysis, and that's basically. So everything more lower level, based, everything around the chain, basically.
So, Gnosis itself abstracted away these companies, spun them off, and now they're kind of maintaining themselves under the Gnosis name, but they're operating independently. Perfect.
They even got rid of the Gnosis name, right? So Gnosis Safe is now Safe Wallet, so they rebranded completely to remove Gnosis. CowSwap was Gnosis Protocol, I think. Again, very different name. Of course, everyone knows it's the same ecosystem, but they are very different projects right now, and we don't share. We share friendships, whatever, but nothing like company-wise. We don't. We work closely together, but not as the same team, basically.
Cool. So I've been in the Colorado blockchain community since 2018. It's very Ethereum and EVM centric. It's focused on tools that were built in ETHLand. So I actually remember being rewarded for doing a trash pickup volunteer day. I got rewarded in DAI on XDAI. And that was kind of my first time using that network. I got to see how cheap the fees were, how fast it was. So I think it's really interesting that Gnosis Chain kind of merged with or forked DAI. Could you share a little bit about what that relationship looks like, how the two communities merged, and how now Gnosis Chain has its own identity that has been kind of derived from that by the converging of the two communities?
So I don't actually exactly know how this happened because I wasn't there at the time. So I experienced it on Swarm's side actually at that time. When of course they rebranded XDAI to Gnosis Chain, and then Gnosis Chain was before an Aura chain with PostDAO, so basically proof of stake kind of chain with only I think 21 validators, if I'm not mistaken. So quite a bit more centralized. When Gnosis Chain became Gnosis Chain from XDAI, they worked on the merge. So basically the exact same thing that happened to Ethereum. So except of going from proof of work to proof of stake with Ethereum, we went from proof of stake to also proof of stake, but a different kind and more decentralized one. There's not much more I can say, I'm afraid, on that side because I wasn't there. But so Gnosis Chain was XDAI, changed to be way more Ethereum centric. But that's everything I can say.
Cool. No, I appreciate that. Thanks for not making things up. So one of the things that kind of popped out to me is that there are a lot of similarities and differences between Ethereum and Gnosis Chain. So could you just kind of like dig a little bit into how the two chains kind of share a similar set of characteristics, and then maybe some of the different types of challenges that Gnosis Chain is facing because of the differences between Ethereum and Gnosis Chain?
Right. So they are very, very similar, of course, because we are based on Ethereum. So we support roughly the same clients. Only on the execution layer, we only support Aragon and Nethermind at this point, and Geth is being worked on, hopefully soon to be finished. And on Ethereum, of course, there are more clients, execution clients specifically, for example, Besu or Wrath or, many others. On the constellation side, we are basically running exactly the same as Ethereum. So we have all the same clients, except for Prism that is, it's not working for now, but we are also working on that. So on the consensus layer side, it's exactly the same. On the execution layer, the biggest difference, or I guess there are two. The first one being that we have a block time of 5 seconds in comparison to Ethereum's 12 seconds, so 2.4 times faster, and epochs of only 16 slots rather than 32 slots. That makes finality a bit faster, basically. And of course, we have a bit more throughput because we have faster blocks, which also comes with its trade-off, of course, because it is more difficult to validate for a Gnosis chain, theoretically, because you have to build the blocks way faster. It also uses more, bandwidth, storage, and compute because of that. So that's a trade-off, of course, which could potentially lead to a bit of centralization, because if, a node in South Africa with a very bad connection, for example, could not follow the chain, or at least not as easily as Ethereum. So there is a downside to that. But of course, you have a bit higher scalability and cheaper prices, but that's not only because of that. The second difference is that the base, the native token is not ETH or something that can fluctuate. It's actually DAI. So, so you're not dependent on some token that can increase or lose value, basically on a whim. So a transaction today that is 10 Gwei in gas price, will cost the same today and in 1 year, basically. But in Ethereum, the same transaction could cost 10 times more if Ethereum is worth, Ether is worth 10 times more. But still, we are validating with GNO. That's also a difference, actually, because on Ethereum, you validate with the native token. On Gnosis, you have the native token be, DAI, sorry. And the validating token is GNO. So that's also a difference. So when you validate on Gnosis Chain, you actually get consensus layer rewards in GNO and transaction fees in XDAI. So that's a bit different. And I think that's mostly it. For the rest, we are very closely aligned with Ethereum. We believe, in Ethereum's ecosystem and everything. So we follow it quite religiously. And we're actually doing, hardforking to Dencoin basically at the same time as Ethereum. We really want to keep to stay in line. We are exploring additional features, but the way we build them is actually not integrated in the chain, and more like as a plugging architecture, if that makes sense. So that we can stay in sync with Ethereum without having to do many changes every time. And then if this works out and is interesting for the community, for the ecosystem, we could potentially adapt this for Ethereum as well later down the road, and maybe have a bit more tightly coupled the tech, basically. But for now, we're trying to just build it as a plugin architecture.
Can you give an example like this of this? I'm thinking maybe. Yeah, could you just give an example of how this kind of plug and play features or modularity that isn't implementable into Ethereum right now, but could be based off of the work that you've done with Gnosis Chain? Can you just kind of Eli 5 an example?
Yeah, absolutely. It's something that could not be done on Ethereum, but maybe we have it easier, basically, because it's a smaller chain that has less value locked inside, so there's less risk, and just validators to coordinate and whatever. We can iterate a bit faster, I would say. So one example is the shadowized beacon chain. So basically, the idea is to have encrypted transactions in the base layer. So for now, if you want to, right now in Ethereum, if you want to avoid MEV or, getting front run and things like that, you basically have to use a private mempool. So for example, Flashbots or MEV blocker or this type of service, which of course comes with another caveat, right? So technically, you are protected by them, but they still have your transaction and they can still play with it, right? So we actually give a lot of power to those services, right? So Flashbots could just decide to they probably wouldn't do it because of reputation, but they could technically make a lot of money by emitting all the transactions that only they have access to, which I'm not a huge fan of. And on Gnosis Chain, we want to say we want to have a neutral block space. So no centralized entities, no one that can censor you, no one that can all of this. So for example, on Ethereum, you can also, most blocks are, I don't have the data right now, I forgot about it, but most blocks are actually censored with opaque compliance, basically. So now the cash, all those services just cannot, transactions that use those services are mostly blacklisted. Of course, you can still get a transaction through, but it will take way more time because validators are not including them in most blocks. Oh, you will get in at some point, but it could take time. So the idea to fix this, of course, the way we're trying to do it is with Shutter, so with a partner. The idea would be to encrypt transactions actually on-chain directly. So you post an encrypted transaction, and then validators have to include them in the next block in the right order. So they can't decrypt them and then choose the order because then they get slashed. So we would have in the base layer encrypted transactions that cannot be censored and that cannot be sandwiched because you cannot choose the order, basically. And this is built as a plugin architecture, I would say, on Gnosis Chain. And potentially, if it's well received or makes a lot of sense, then this could be adopted by the Ethereum ecosystem. We haven't talked about it with DF or anything yet. It's very much in the beginning phases, right? But that could be an idea at least.
Do you, based off of the research that you do and the team that you work with, are you getting the sense that this kind of MEV resistance is becoming kind of like maybe in the future, almost all popular chains will have some sort of MEV resistance baked into the architecture?
That's a good question. For one, I'm not very familiar with many other ecosystems. I know a bit about Solana and Polkadot, of course, but I don't know if it's very interesting to have this in the base layer. I think some degree of MEV is always interesting. Can be interesting at least. I don't know. It's a tough question. I think, you don't need MEV protection for everything, right? There are perfectly valid transactions that don't need to be MEV proof. But I think some sort of mechanism to not get, some mechanism will have to exist, I guess, especially for everything related to DeFi. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. I just asked because I think in the past 2 weeks, alongside Gnosis Chain, I've seen 2 other projects that are going after MEV resistance. And another solution I've seen alongside encrypted mempools is enveloped transactions. So I was just kind of curious if this is becoming like a forthcoming industry narrative or anything like that, but I think that remains to be seen.
Yeah, absolutely.
So something then I'm curious to hear about is Gnosis Chain is kind of at this moment of figuring out what its identity is going to be moving forward. And in that respect, is Gnosis going to be an L1 or is it going to be an L2? Or maybe some sort of hybrid of the two. So again, let's just assume our audience is both made up of crypto natives and somebody who bought their first Ethereum yesterday. Maybe we can just briefly do a quick overview of the differences between what an L1 and an L2 is. And then maybe you can share some of your insights into how you see Gnosis Chain kind of filling those gaps or becoming either an L1, an L2, L1.5, or whatever moving forward.
Okay, so maybe let's start with the beginning. So to keep it quite simple, the difference between a layer 1 and a layer 2 is that the layer 2 chain would, in most cases, inherit its security from the layer 1 it's based on. So, for example, Optimism, Arbitrum, all those basically use Ethereum as the base layer. So you post transactions on Ethereum and then they get executed on Optimism and Avalanche and whatever. So that's the biggest part, I would say. So Optimism doesn't have validators. They don't have block. Well, they have a sequencer. It's kind of the same thing, but it's not. But yeah, they don't have validators, no miners, no things like that. Whereas Ethereum has validators, Bitcoin has miners, Solana has validators as well. So those are layer 1 chains. Gnosis Chain also has validators, of course, exactly the same as Ethereum. We have, I think, 180, 90, maybe even 200,000 soon validators right now. Ethereum, I haven't checked recently, but more than 800,000 as far as I know. So yeah, that's the main difference. So layer 2s get their security, so validators and miners from the layer 1 they are based on. And of course, with the idea to scale faster, so have cheaper transactions, more per second, things like that. So for Gnosis Chain specifically, actually there have been a lot of talks by our founders because there are trade-offs of being a layer 2. So again, I'm not necessarily extremely up to date with everything related to layer 2s, but most of them, up until recently at least, were quite centralized. So they have one sequencer, meaning the sequencer that is run mostly by, the foundation that spun up the chain, right? They can decide to do whatever they want. So they can order the transactions like they want to. They can censor transactions. So yeah, it's very centralized. Of course, there are things that are put in place to solve this. For example, inclusion lists and things like that. So you can force your transaction into a layer 2 block. But I'm not sure how readily available this already is. So yeah, for now, this chain definitely is going to stay a layer 1 chain, because we want to stay censorship resistant and to have this credibly neutral block space. But we are exploring ways to kind of get the security benefits from Ethereum on Gnosis Chain with better bridges and basically technology that can, how can I explain it in an easy way, but post basically snapshots of Gnosis Chain to Ethereum. And then if something goes wrong or the chain gets compromised or we have a 66% attack from validators or I don't know, the entire network breaks down tomorrow for some reason that technically can't happen, but let's imagine, then you would be able to go to Ethereum and still get your funds out of this chain to Ethereum. So kind of like you would be able to do on a layer 2, but still while keeping the layer 1 validators we have currently. So this is something we are exploring. It's not at all something that is going to see the light anytime soon. But still, we have ZK EVMs now that can basically annihilate transactions and verify that basically from a site route you execute transactions and you get the right one after that. So basically to verify that that the chain went correctly, everything worked out, you can verify that. So technically we could emulate Gnosis Chain on Ethereum, for example, roughly said. It's very basically explained. And with that you could potentially be able to at least get your funds out.
So you brought up an interesting point with the ZK VMs and how you can potentially get your Gnosis funds out on Ethereum. In that way, Gnosis would be acting as an L2 just in this specific instance. How do you keep your finger on the pulse for all these ZK VM projects? There's a handful whose mainnets just went live in the past quarter or two. There's probably a handful other projects that are building. So, and you also have tons of things to keep your focus on building in-house. So I'm just also kind of curious to hear, how do you keep your education up to date? Because there is just so much stuff to pay attention to, not only in the blockchain space in general, but let alone EVM land. So what are some of the best practices that you and your team have for paying attention to what's going on out there and figuring out what you might want to implement into Gnosis Chain?
Right, that's a good question. There is indeed a lot happening. I say, in general, it's just impossible to keep up with everything. So I guess we kind of get to it once it makes sense. So for example, Gnosis Chain right now, the transaction costs are quite cheap, so we don't have to scale right now. But still, for example, for Gnosis Pay, the idea is to have a Visa payment network that is very high scale. So this will require at some point scaling solutions, be it layer 2s, layer 3s, ZK VMs, or optimism-based stacks, or whatever. So this is already being explored, of course, because we have to be ready when that happens, right? And then I would say participating in hackathons is very interesting generally because you learn about a lot of stuff happening while judging. Partnerships, very important. You talk with all kinds of different projects for partnerships, grants, or cross promotions or whatever. That is very interesting as well. And then we're all, I think, very passionate. So we read about the latest and greatest. It's fun. We want to learn about it. So that's also how most of it happens, I would say. But just staying up to date and everything is basically impossible. So once you need it, to research it, and then hopefully it's useful.
It's funny how analog that sounds. Basically have conversations and read papers that people write.
Yeah.
So you mentioned earlier the shutterized beacon chain, which I think is kind of like the next big focus on your roadmap for Gnosis Chain's infrastructure. We talked a little bit about MEV resistance and how it will be built into the beacon chain. You guys are currently live with testnet. Can you share some insights gleaned from the beacon chain being on testnet? Can you also share some other kind of features that you're looking to build into it?
Okay, so we do have a beacon chain on testnets, and we have Shutter deployed on testnet right now, but the combination between both of them is not live yet. So basically, Shutter, it's quite complex. They have keywords that basically generate keys to decrypt the transactions that are that have to be included in the text blocks. The beacon chain, we have it. Every Ethereum, no, not everyone, but Ethereum, Gnosis Chain, and of course all the testnets based on those have a beacon chain, right? That's like part of the merge back in the day. But we don't have the integration between those two yet. We are working on it, of course, but that's something you can already test.
Cool. So what about interoperability? We've spoken a lot about L2s, ZK EVMs, kind of, there's an inherent nature of interoperability when it comes to EVM land. But what about in the future, let's say Cosmos really takes off, or Polkadot or Solana, some of these non-EVM sort of ecosystems. How do you guys think about those? Are you staying in your lane, working on EVM land? Are you keeping some doors open in case there does become a future where Cosmos and the Ethereum ecosystem are extremely intertwined? Just from a chain's perspective, how do you view this?
That's a good question. I think in my team, at least at Gnosis Chain, we are fairly EVM centered. Of course, we have the bridge department that has the main bridge between Ethereum and Gnosis Chain, but it's exploring a lot of technologies to have other types of bridges and more secure bridges. So, for example, we are working on Hashi, which is the objective is to have the bridge to end all the bridges. Basically, that's the idea. But the way it works basically is to have many bridges that basically work together. So you are on Ethereum, for example, you want to bridge to Gnosis Chain, and you can, through Hashi, you would say, okay, I want 5 bridges to agree that this transaction actually went through, for example. And then when you have consensus from all those bridges on Gnosis Chain, then you can mint tokens or relay a message or whatever. So basically kind of decentralizing the bridge part that is historically quite centralized. So that's the idea of Hashi. Of course, this right now is still EVM focused, but there's no reason why we could not bridge between different technologies, right? So on the bridge side, I'm sure we are going to work with other projects in the future. But we don't have much more research with other chains, except for bridges, at least.
That makes sense. Focus on what you know and build out what you kind of have on your radar and in your ecosystem and the knowledge base that your team has of broader EVM land. You did mention earlier that there's this kind of dual token model where there's the GNO kind of governance token, for lack of better phrasing, that also churns out rewards in GNO and as well as DAI, I believe. Right. So I'm just kind of curious then, with governance, there's voting. Presumably, we're voting on things that matter about the direction of the network. So how does Gnosis DAO kind of play into the work that you do, does the DAO dictate any of the things that you're focusing on as head of infrastructure? Is the DAO focusing on completely different sorts of governance issues? How do kind of like the two overlap?
Yeah, so the DAO does govern what we do. We are fairly independent, but we still want to have the community's like opinion. So for bigger projects or important projects or anything that could impact basically our users or the ecosystem, we ourselves write proposals to the DAO. And then our users can discuss them and vote on them and potentially even like reject them if they are not happy with it. I don't think it has ever happened before, but I'm sure, for example, for the X9 to Gnosis Chain transition, there must have been a lot of conversations going on because before there was like the stake token, which was actually like called stake. And that was converted to GNO, for example. So this is something that has to be discussed and then voted on. Yeah, I mean, when we do bridge changes and things like that, we have to discuss them. So there's a lot of governance. And even just for bridge updates, for example, it does not necessarily go through the DAO, but we have many different signers, different companies signing on the bridge multisig that then can validate that we did our job correctly, that they agree with what you're doing and all of that. So basically for everything important we do, there are many steps and we try to keep the community up to date. For example, for the hard fork to Denkun, I guess there's no really reason to ask the community because, I mean, if they don't want to, they can also not update, for example, or hard fork or whatever. They probably wouldn't, but they can. But imagine if, for example, tomorrow, instead of staking 1 GNO, you had to stake 20, then that's something we would discuss with the community for sure.
Mm-hmm. Do you have a sense of who the stakeholders are? Is it like the Gnosis founders? Is it teams that have a lot of stake because they build in the ecosystem? Is it just simple retail token holders? Is it a combination of all? Do you not have any idea?
I honestly couldn't tell you. I mean, you should ask a couple of people that, I guess.
Cool. Kind of wrapping up, I want to zoom out a little bit. And I understand full well that you work on infrastructure and more technical things. So this might be a question that you might not be able to answer, but I am curious to hear how regional regulations might impact how you and your team build and what you build. I'm based in the States and outlook for crypto is very shaky right now. A lot of projects are leaving, companies are offshoring. Folks aren't, international folks who would have come to the US to study aren't even coming here anymore to study. So as a country, we're losing out on talent. So I'm just wondering if regional and jurisdictional regulations and outlook on crypto and blockchain has any impact at all on your outlook or the way that you and your team choose to build?
Right. So, I'm more on the chain side indeed. So that's, censorship resistant whenever we cannot just bring access to the United States, of course. We are still building, projects. For example, we have Gnosis Earn, some projects that need to interact with or could interact with the United States, mostly front ends, where we mostly just block access to the US and VPNs. But that's the extent of what I personally know. I know for Gnosis Pay, there's also a lot of regulations, of course. It's not available in the United States yet. But I don't know. I mean, I'm sure the legal team is doing a lot of work here on that side.
Yeah, it's unfortunate becoming more and more used to missing out on airdrops or participating in projects simply because of the nation that some folks live in. But I appreciate that there's only so much you need to worry about when it comes to technical stuff, especially as it pertains to censorship resistance. So you are the head of infrastructure. Gnosis Chain has hundreds of thousands of validator nodes. Excuse me if I used the term incorrectly. long story short, whenever you're pushing out a major update, there's a lot of collaboration and a lot of people that you need to get on the same page. So what is kind of like your biggest lesson learned or your biggest takeaway or biggest piece of advice that you have for like major architecture upgrades when you have to get so many teams on the same page for iterating upon the current version of the network that you have? What's kind of like the key takeaway for success when performing major network architectural upgrades?
Well, I guess the most important part is just give enough time for people or users to update, basically. So, for example, for Denkun, I think everything is ready since a few weeks, and it is in 2 weeks. So people had, or in total would have had 4 weeks to update. Push comes out constantly, so every couple of days you have to tell the community that might not have been there last week, for example, that they have to update, which versions they have to update to, what criteria they have to fulfill to be ready for the next update, all of this. So yeah, mostly just comes and giving enough time. I would say that's the key to a successful network update or hard fork in this case.
Simple and short and straight to the point. I love it. So at DAppCon 2023 in Berlin, you spoke about the launch to the shutterized beacon chain. Let's put on our speculation hat and let's say it's November 2024. What do you want to be on stage at an event like DAppCon talking about for the future of Gnosis Chain? After you've kind of gone after the goals that you had for this year, what are you hoping to do in the medium term with Gnosis Chain?
That's a very good question. Yeah, I don't really have a great answer for this right now. So, of course, I mean, we want to stay in sync with Ethereum. Hopefully, also help Ethereum a bit if we can. But yeah, I mean, that's mostly the important part: staying in sync with Ethereum, building on top of Gnosis Chain, potentially for like scalability and Gnosis Pay. But yeah, I don't have a better answer for you, I'm afraid.
It's kind of an unfair question because just surviving quarter to quarter is a feat in and of itself in the blockchain and crypto space. So I appreciate that. Cool. So what's the best way that people can keep up to date with you, or if maybe a developer is listening who's interested in building on Gnosis Chain, what's the best way that they can reach out to that community and ecosystem?
I guess the most active way, I mean, of course, Gnosis.io, you can find the Discord link and I guess a Twitter link as well. So follow Gnosis.io and Gnosis Chain on Twitter, join the Discord and then just chat with us. We are available. I am on Discord often as well. So yeah, just come talk.
Love it. Philippe, thank you so much for sharing an hour of your time today. It was awesome to dig into infrastructure with you and to hear more about Gnosis Chain and kind of where you guys have come from and where you're going and some exciting things to pay attention to. I was looking forward to this. I've been hearing many folks talk about the Gnosis ecosystem since I've been in the blockchain space since 2017. So it was an honor to have you come join the show and to talk about some of the really cool things you're working on.
Well, thanks for having me.
And looking forward to catching you again on an episode later in the future. It's unfortunate you're not here for ETH Denver, but hopefully we get to run into each other at some sort of event in the future.
Absolutely. Maybe next year.
Cheers, brother.
Cheers.
Well, what did you think of that conversation? I thought it was super interesting to have Philippe join and break down some of the rather large concepts, such as layer ones versus layer twos, and how Gnosis Chain examines the trade-offs of each as it iterates on its own chain. It was also really cool to hear more about the technical differences between Ethereum and Gnosis Chain, but also how the two complement one another. And it was interesting to learn more about how the Gnosis ecosystem has decentralized itself and given each of its internally incubated projects, like Safe, more autonomy by spinning these teams off into their own entities. To keep up to date with the podcast, head over to www.smarteconomypodcast.com. And if you like the guests that we've had on the show, please consider showing support for the show by rating and reviewing your favorite episodes on your favorite podcasting platform. Every rating and review really helps us get the show in front of more ears and eyes. And of course, if you're a NEO token holder, please consider voting for NEO News today as your council representative. We've been serving the NEO ecosystem since 2017 and will continue to do so by putting portions of our council rewards directly back into ecosystem growth initiatives. With all that said, thank you so much for taking the time to listen to the Smart Economy podcast, and we look forward to catching you on the next episode.